She was sold to a man out west, until the cowboy said, "Not while I'm breathing." The town of Red Hollow sat quietly under the wide, golden sky. Dust moved slowly along the empty streets, carried by a warm afternoon wind. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and nothing unusual ever happened. That is why, when a wagon rolled into town with a young woman sitting silently in the back, people began to notice. Her name was Eliza Carter. She kept her hands folded in her lap, her eyes low, but not weak. There was something in her expression, something calm, yet uncertain. Her dress was simple, a little worn from travel, and her face showed signs of long days on the road. Beside the wagon walked a tall man in a dark coat. His name was Mr. Hawthorne, a wealthy ranch owner from the lands further west. People in Red Hollow knew of him. He was not a man who smiled much, and he spoke only when needed. The wagon stopped in front of the general store. Shopkeepers paused their work. A few townspeople stepped closer, pretending to be busy while quietly watching. Something about the moment felt strange. Mr. Hawthorne turned to Eliza and said in a calm but firm voice, "Come along." Eliza stepped down slowly. Her boots touched the dry ground, and for a brief moment she looked around the town. It was small, but peaceful, very different from where she had come from. Inside her heart, she had hoped this journey would bring her something better. She had been told she would have a new start, a place to belong. But now, standing there, she wasn't so sure. Near the store, a man with a small notebook greeted Hawthorne with a nod. He seemed ready, as if he had been expecting them. "Everything is prepared," the man said. Eliza looked between them, confused. She had not been told much, only that she would be taken west, where life would improve. But now, the way they spoke, it felt like something else, something colder. Mr. Hawthorne reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. The man with the notebook checked it carefully, then gave a short nod. Around them, the townspeople grew quiet. Eliza's fingers tightened slightly. She could feel the weight of the moment, even if she did not fully understand it. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. "Sir, what is happening?" Hawthorne glanced at her, not unkindly but not warmly either. "You will be staying at my ranch," he said. "Everything has been arranged." Arranged. That word echoed in her mind. Eliza took a small step back. "But I thought I would be working, choosing—" Her words faded. She noticed how no one interrupted, no one questioned. The silence around her felt heavy. The man with the notebook cleared his throat. "It's all been agreed upon." Eliza looked around, hoping someone might explain, or even just meet her eyes with understanding. Some looked away, others simply watched. A feeling of unease settled deep in her chest. At that very moment, the distant sound of hoofbeats broke the stillness. Slow, steady, approaching. Everyone turned. A lone rider came into view from the far end of the street. His horse moved with calm confidence, kicking up small clouds of dust. The rider sat straight, his hat low, his expression unreadable. This was Caleb Reed. He was not from Red Hollow, but people had seen him pass through before. A quiet cowboy, known for keeping to himself. He didn't stay long in any one place. As he rode closer, his eyes moved over the scene, the wagon, the people, Eliza. And then he noticed her face. That was when his horse slowed. There was something in her eyes that caught his attention. Not fear exactly, but a quiet question, like someone who had just realized they had no control over what was happening next. Caleb guided his horse to a stop nearby. He didn't speak right away. He simply watched. Mr. Hawthorne continued his business, as if the rider did not matter. But Caleb noticed everything. The paper in Hawthorne's hand, the silence of the town, the way Eliza stood, still but uncertain. After a moment, Caleb shifted slightly in his saddle. He tipped his hat just enough to be polite, then spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Something don't sit right here." The words were simple, not loud, but they carried across the quiet street. Every head turned again. Mr. Hawthorne looked up, his expression unchanged. "This does not concern you." Caleb's eyes moved from Hawthorne back to Eliza. For a brief second their eyes met, and in that moment he understood. He didn't know her story, he didn't know the details, but he knew one thing for certain. She wasn't being given a choice. Caleb rested one hand lightly on the saddle horn and spoke again, just as calmly as before. Maybe it should. The wind picked up slightly, lifting dust into the air. The town held its breath. Something had just changed. The wind moved softly through the streets of Red Hollow, but the silence now felt heavier than before. Everyone was watching. Caleb Reed remained on his horse, calm and steady, as if he had all the time in the world, but his eyes stayed fixed on Eliza. Mr. Hawthorne closed the paper in his hand and turned fully toward Caleb. His voice was controlled, but firm. "This is a private matter," Hawthorne said. "I suggest you move along." Caleb tilted his head slightly, as if considering the words. Then he glanced around at the people standing nearby, the shopkeeper, the stable boy, a few townsfolk gathered in small groups. "Doesn't look so private," Caleb replied quietly. A few people shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. Eliza stood still, her heart beating faster now. For the first time since arriving, someone had questioned what was happening. Someone had noticed. She looked at Caleb again, unsure, but also hopeful. Mr. Hawthorne took a step forward. "Everything here has been agreed upon," he said. "The young lady is under my care now. There is no problem." Caleb's gaze did not move. "Did she say that?" he asked. The question hung in the air. Eliza felt all eyes turn to her. Her throat tightened. Speaking now felt difficult, like trying to push through something invisible. But she knew this moment mattered. She began softly. Her voice shook at first, but she tried again. "I was told I would have a choice," Eliza said, her words slow but clear. "I was told I could decide where I would go and what I would do." The crowd murmured quietly. Mr. Hawthorne's expression hardened slightly. "You were given an opportunity," he said. "A good one, more than most would receive." Eliza shook her head just a little. "That's not the same as choosing." The words surprised even her. Caleb noticed. A faint change came to his expression, not a smile, but something close to approval. He gently swung one leg over and stepped down from his horse. His boots touched the dusty ground with a soft thud. Now he stood between Hawthorne and Eliza, not blocking the way, but present enough to be noticed. "No one's saying you can't offer her a place," Caleb said calmly, "but it sounds like she didn't get the whole truth." Hawthorne crossed his arms. "And you believe it is your place to interfere?" Caleb shrugged slightly. "I believe it's my place to listen when something feels wrong." The tension grew, but no one raised their voice. It was not a fight of force. It was something quieter, but just as strong. Eliza took a small breath. She felt it now, the chance to speak, to be heard. "I didn't agree to be sent here like this," she said, her voice stronger than before. "I thought I would be working, maybe helping in a home or a store, not being decided for." A woman near the general store looked down, troubled. The shopkeeper rubbed the back of his neck, thinking. Hawthorne glanced around, noticing the change in the crowd. He was not used to being questioned like this. "You are making this more complicated than it needs to be," he said. "The arrangements are already done." Caleb looked at him steadily. "Then maybe they shouldn't be." The words were simple, but they carried weight. For a moment, no one moved. Then Caleb turned slightly, addressing the people of the town instead. "Anyone here hear her agree to this?" he asked. The question spread through the crowd like a quiet ripple. No one answered right away. The stable boy looked at the ground. The shopkeeper hesitated. A few others exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, an older man near the edge of the group spoke, his voice low. "I didn't hear her say much at all." That was enough. Eliza felt something shift inside her. The fear that had been sitting in her chest began to loosen, just a little. Caleb nodded once, then looked back at Hawthorne. "She's got a voice," he said. "Seems like it ought to matter." Hawthorne's jaw tightened. He was a man used to control, used to people stepping aside. But now, things were different. He looked at Eliza. "Do you understand what you are refusing?" he asked. "A stable place, security." Eliza met his gaze. For the first time, she did not look away. "I understand," she said quietly, "but I want to choose it, not be given it without a say." The words were steady now, clear, real. The wind picked up again, brushing through the street as if carrying her voice further. Caleb stepped forward just enough to stand beside her, not in front, not leading, but supporting. He looked at Hawthorne and spoke, his voice calm but unshaken. "Not while I'm breathing." The sentence settled over the town like a final line drawn in the sand. No anger, no threat, just truth. The people of Red Hollow felt it. Something had changed, and now there was no going back. The air in Red Hollow felt different now. The same dusty street, the same wooden buildings, the same quiet town. But something had shifted. People were no longer just watching. They were thinking. Eliza stood a little straighter. Her hands were still, no longer tightly held together. The fear inside her had not disappeared, but it had changed. It was no longer holding her back. Caleb stood beside her, calm as ever. He did not speak again right away. He didn't need to. The moment was no longer his alone. Now it belonged to everyone. Mr. Hawthorne looked around slowly. His sharp eyes studied each face in the crowd. He could feel it, the change in their expressions. Less silence, more doubt. "This is unnecessary," Hawthorne said, his voice still controlled. "The matter was settled before we arrived." But his words did not carry the same weight as before. From near the general store, the shopkeeper finally stepped forward. He adjusted his apron and cleared his throat. "I remember when they came through last week," he said carefully. "The man who brought her said she was looking for work, said she'd decide once she saw the place." A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Hawthorne frowned slightly. "That is not what was written in the agreement." The shopkeeper hesitated, then shook his head. "Maybe not, but that's what was said." That was the first voice. Then another came. The stable boy, who had been standing near the edge, shifted nervously before speaking. "I helped with the horses when they stopped outside town," he said. She asked questions. Sounded like she didn't know where she was being taken exactly." Eliza glanced at him, surprised. She remembered him now, the boy who had offered water to the horses, who had given her a quick, kind smile. More people began to whisper. Caleb watched quietly. His eyes moved from one person to another, not pushing, not forcing, just letting the truth come forward. Eliza felt something warm rise inside her. Not comfort, not yet, but something close to it. Courage. She took a small step forward. "I didn't understand what was happening," she said, her voice steady. "I trusted what I was told. I thought I would be given a chance to decide once I arrived." Her eyes moved across the crowd. "I never agreed to be handed over like this." The words were simple, but they carried meaning, real meaning. Mr. Hawthorne's expression tightened. He was not used to being questioned by many at once. His control over the situation was slipping, not because of force, but because of voices. He looked at Caleb again. "You've stirred quite a scene," Hawthorne said. Caleb gave a small shrug. "Didn't do much, just asked a question." That was true, and somehow it had been enough. The older man who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, leaning slightly on his cane. "A person's choice matters," he said slowly. "Always has." A woman near the store nodded in agreement. She should be able to decide for herself, she added. The quiet town of Red Hollow was no longer silent. Eliza felt her heartbeat steady. She was no longer standing alone in uncertainty. The weight she had carried since the journey began was starting to lift. Caleb glanced at her briefly. "You're doing just fine," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Eliza gave the smallest nod. Mr. Hawthorne took a deep breath. He straightened his coat, trying to hold on to what remained of his authority. "You are all forgetting something," he said. "I offered her a good life, a place to stay, work, stability." No one argued with that, but no one agreed either. Eliza looked at him directly. "I'm not refusing a good life," she said. "I'm asking to choose it myself." That was the difference, and now everyone could see it clearly. The wind moved gently again, brushing past the buildings, lifting small trails of dust. It felt like the town itself was listening. Hawthorne's eyes moved across the crowd one last time. The shopkeeper, the stable boy, the older man, the quiet woman, and Caleb. Always calm, always steady. This was not a battle he could win by standing firm, not anymore. The ground beneath him had changed, not through force, through truth. Hawthorne let out a slow breath. His shoulders lowered just slightly. "I see," he said at last. The words were quiet, but they meant something. The tension in the air loosened. Eliza felt it instantly. A moment passed. Then Hawthorne looked at her again, this time with less hardness in his eyes. "If that is how you feel," he said, "then I will not insist further." A soft wave of relief moved through the crowd. No cheers, no loud reactions, just a quiet understanding that something important had happened. Eliza blinked, as if making sure she had heard correctly. "You mean," she began. Hawthorne gave a small nod. "You are free to decide your own path." Those words felt different, stronger, real. Eliza took a breath she didn't realize she had been holding for so long. Caleb stepped back slightly, giving her space. This moment was hers. The town watched as Eliza stood there, no longer uncertain, no longer silent. She had found her voice, and it had changed everything. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across Red Hollow, it became clear. The story that started as a quiet arrival had turned into something much bigger, something no one in town would forget. The sun was beginning to set over Red Hollow. Golden light spread across the town, soft and warm, as if the land itself was finally at peace. The tension from earlier had faded, leaving behind a quiet calm that felt different from before. Eliza Carter stood in the middle of the street, still taking in what had just happened. For the first time in many days, she felt free. Not guided, not decided for. Free. Mr. Hawthorne adjusted his coat one last time. His face was no longer tense, just thoughtful. He looked at Eliza with a measured expression. "You have made your choice," he said calmly. "I will not stand in your way." There was no anger in his voice now, only acceptance. Eliza nodded gently. "Thank you," she replied. Hawthorne gave a small nod in return. Without another word, he turned and walked back toward his wagon. The man with the notebook followed, closing his pages quietly. Within moments, the wagon rolled away from Red Hollow, disappearing slowly down the dusty road. And just like that, it was over. The crowd began to relax. Some people returned to their work, while others stayed a little longer, exchanging quiet words about what they had witnessed. The shopkeeper gave Eliza a kind smile before heading back inside. The stable boy waved shyly, then hurried off to tend to the horses. The older man with the cane simply nodded at her, as if to say, "You did well." Eliza watched them all, her heart full in a way she could not fully explain. This town, these people, they had not known her, and yet they had listened. Slowly, the street began to empty. Only one person remained nearby, Caleb Reed. He stood beside his horse, adjusting the saddle straps as if nothing unusual had happened. His movements were calm, steady, just like before. Eliza looked at him for a moment before walking closer. "Mr. Reed," she said softly. Caleb glanced up, then gave a small nod. "You all right?" She smiled faintly. "I think I am now." There was a short silence between them. Not awkward, just quiet. Eliza looked toward the open land beyond the town. The horizon stretched far and wide, painted in shades of gold and orange. "I don't really know what comes next," she admitted, "but for the first time, that doesn't scare me." Caleb rested one hand lightly on the saddle. "That's a good place to be," he said. Eliza let out a small breath. "You didn't have to step in back there," she added. "You didn't even know me." Caleb shrugged slightly. "Didn't need to." She tilted her head, curious. "Why?" He paused for a moment, then answered simply, "Because it mattered." Those 3 words stayed with her. Eliza looked down briefly, then back up at him. "You helped me find my voice," she said. "I won't forget that." Caleb gave a small, almost shy smile. "You already had it," he replied. "Just needed a moment to use it." The wind moved gently around them, carrying the cool feeling of evening. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Caleb reached for his reins. "Well," he said, "I should be heading out." Eliza felt a small pause in her chest at those words. "Do you always leave so quickly?" she asked. Caleb placed his foot in the stirrup. "Usually." He swung himself up onto the horse with ease. The animal shifted slightly, ready to move. Eliza stepped forward just a little. "You could stay," she said, "at least for a while." Caleb looked at her, considering. The town behind her was quiet now, peaceful. The same town where just hours ago everything had felt uncertain. Now it felt different, safer, warmer. "I might," Caleb said after a moment. "For a day or two." Eliza smiled. "That sounds fair." He tipped his hat lightly. "Looks like this place could use someone who knows how to speak up," he added. Eliza let out a soft laugh. "Maybe it could." The last light of the sun touched the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. Caleb guided his horse to turn slightly, but he didn't ride off just yet. Not this time. Eliza stood beside him, looking out at the open plains. For once, she wasn't being taken somewhere. She was choosing where to go, and that made all the difference. The road ahead was unknown, but it no longer felt uncertain. It felt full of possibility. As the stars slowly began to appear in the evening sky, Red Hollow settled into a peaceful night. And in that quiet moment, 2 lives, once strangers on a dusty road, stood at the beginning of something new. Not a bargain, not an arrangement, but a choice. A new horizon.